Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel once again. Today we have the case of KG or Kelly Jean. Before we start talking about Kelly, we need to meet another person, Wade Allen. At the time of the events, this man was 39 years old. There is really very little information available on the internet about his life, but with what little is known, we can get an idea of his personality. He was a fairly antisocial man with few friends. He didn't like to leave his house much. And generally his social interactions were through social networks like Facebook. As you can imagine, a person like this didn't have many partners or romantic relationships. Only 2 relationships he had are known, and both are marked by acts of violence. Allen's first relationship was with a woman named Katie who knew this man since childhood. They started a romantic relationship in 2018. Katie had already been married and had children from her previous relationships. At first, everything seemed to be going relatively normal, but quickly Allen began to show his true nature. He was a violent, manipulative, and possessive person. The breakdown of this relationship came when, from one day to the next, Allen wanted to move into Katie's house. He had nowhere to live and simply demanded that the woman take him into her home. Katie lived in a place that was quite small, along with her children. There was no room for Allen to move in. In addition, she simply did not want to live with him, so she told him that it was not going to be possible. This is when Allen began to insult her and become very violent with her. Fortunately, the situation did not escalate, and after this, they definitely separated. After this relationship, he started one with Kelly Jean Warner, or KG as she was nicknamed by her friends, the victim of this story. It's not very clear how they met. It's believed to be through Facebook, but they soon started a romantic relationship. And from what little we know about Kelly, we can assume that she was in a vulnerable situation. She had a history of psychiatric problems and also some health issues like diabetes. Kelly also lacked a close relationship with her family. This was most noticeable when she was missing for a long time, and it didn't catch the attention of any family member. The relationship between Allen and Kelly soon became abusive. Allen took advantage of Kelly's vulnerable situation and practically forced her to do whatever he wanted. It is known that Allen used to hit her, mistreat her, and practically kept her locked up in his house. According to a neighbor, he forced her to be naked inside the house and forbade her from leaving the place while he was not there. All of this came to light in a very macabre way, but to see that, let's move on to the facts. It was May 22nd of 2019. At night, the Michigan police received an anonymous call informing them to go check a house in the town of Sturgis. Because this person believed that a crime had been committed and that they would find the body of a woman there. The house was Allen's and the woman he was referring to was Kelly. Police arrived at night and knocked on Allen's door. It took him a few minutes to open the door. He seemed confused and sleepy. One of the police officers recognized Allen. They started asking him about KG, which was how Kelly was known. There, Allen began his lies. He said he hadn't seen her for weeks and that the last interaction he had with her was through Facebook messages. The officers asked him if they could come into his house. All they wanted to confirm was that Kelly wasn't there. Allen refused this first request, saying that his house was dirty, that he was embarrassed, and if they could come back the next day, that way he could clean up a bit. There, the officers pressured him and told him that if he didn't let them in, they would have to get a search warrant. And it would be worse then. Allen, at that moment, agreed to let in the police officer he recognized by sight. He seemed nervous and wanted them to leave as quickly as possible. He showed them the house, the rooms, and the bathroom. Beyond the dirt and mess, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Until the police officer noticed that there was a refrigerator, a cooler, a rather large freezer in the house. So he asked Allen if he could look inside. And that's when Allen becomes very nervous again, trying to find an excuse so that the police officer wouldn't open the door of that freezer. The officer noticed this overly strange behavior and decided to arrest Allen. Meanwhile, as the man was being detained and taken to the police station, reinforcements were called in to search the house. This is where two simultaneous events begin. On one hand, Alan's interrogation, and on the other, the search of his house. As soon as the interrogation began, Alan remained calm and stuck to his story that he hadn't seen Kelly for a long time. Even as he spoke, he ate some cookies. He didn't seem to have much problem with what was happening. But when he found out that the police were searching his house, he started to get more and more nervous because he knew what they were going to find. Gradually, Alan started altering his narrative. He was making it up as he went along to fit with what the police were going to find. First, he confessed that he had a relationship with Kelly, then that there had been acts of violence, that he had hit her on some occasion, but nothing serious. Then he said that she had health problems, and that it was normal for her to faint, fall, or get hit. Little by little, Alan was preparing the ground for what would be his confession. At one point in the story, he tells that one night Kelly was deteriorated, she barely spoke, didn't eat, didn't do anything. It was then that he went to take a bath and, according to him, she fell asleep or fainted and simply didn't get out of the bathtub. All night long. She stayed there with the cold water until he found her the next day when she was no longer breathing. Undoubtedly, the story is hard to believe due to many inconsistencies. First of all, besides everything, he lived with her and didn't check why she wasn't coming out of the bathroom. Even so, the officers played along and asked him what he did next. Alan told them that he wanted to give her a proper burial, but he couldn't. He couldn't move the body by himself. So he thought about some things, thought about what he could do, but ultimately decided that the best option was to dismember the body. He also said that, as he had seen in detective series, he had to keep it cold so it wouldn't deteriorate quickly. So he stored the different parts of the body in the freezer. And up to that point, we could say that's what Alan told the investigators during his interrogation. Of course, this was far from the truth. What actually happened was something much darker and more sinister. When the police conducted the search, they indeed found Kelly's dismembered body distributed in different refrigerators. This part of Alan's story was true, but they quickly realized that it was a homicide. The autopsy revealed that the body had marks and injuries on the neck consistent with strangulation. It was stipulated that this could have been the cause of death. However, due to the state of the body and the time that had passed, it could not be determined with total certainty. So it was declared a homicide, but without specifying the cause of death. Then testimonies against Alan began to appear. First, there was his neighbor, Sherry, who testified that Alan was an abusive person who ruled, beat Kelly, and suspected that he had done something to her. She recounted that one of the last times she went to his house, his refrigerator was emanating a nauseating smell. Also, let's remember that all of this started with an anonymous call to 911. After Alan was arrested, the identity of this person was revealed. It was Stephen Ross, one of this man's closest friends. When asked why he had made the call, why he had turned him in, and why he was so sure that Alan had murdered Kelly, he told them that Alan had contacted him through Facebook and confessed that he had done something very bad and needed help to bury the body. Something that Stephen read, rejected, and promised not to tell anyone, but he told his entire family, and they basically convinced him to call 911. There were also testimonies from other neighbors, including Alan's ex-partner, but undoubtedly, the most chilling testimonies came from Alan's cellmates and other inmates. It seems that during his stay in prison, while awaiting trial, Alan confessed his crimes to other convicts. Before proceeding with the testimonies, some clarifications are necessary. The first is that these testimonies were not taken into account in the trial. That is, they were not taken as a confession on Alan's part. On the other hand, the details of these confessions are truly perverse and macabre, so much so that they left other criminals perplexed and disgusted. Imagine how terrible the story had to be for several prisoners to go and testify all this and for all of them to agree on top of that. They were shocked. Look, what I just said is a warning that it's really strong. And I'm not even going to talk in detail about what he said. I'm not going to tell everything. I'm not going to talk specifically about what he did every minute, what he told people. Complete, right? It's a summary and yet it's pretty ugly. So I'm going to put the minute here and also on the little bar below for those who want to skip this. In these accounts, the prisoners say that Alan admitted to having murdered Kelly. He told 4 different people and all 4 agreed on many details, and also the stories matched evidence found in the house. But this confession wasn't just that he simply killed her, which is already quite macabre, but it was a long and torturous process. It all started one night when Alan strangled Kelly with a white ribbon, a ribbon that was found in his house. When they conducted the search, he strangled her for exactly 5 minutes, and yes, he was timing it until she was lifeless. But it didn't end there. After that, Alan performed cardiopulmonary resuscitation on her until she came back to life. However, she says that from there, she was left in a state where she couldn't speak, couldn't walk, could hardly move. We can speculate that after being suffocated to literally die and then come back to life. She could have had severe brain damage from lack of oxygen and ended up in a sort of vegetative state. Afterwards, Alan told the inmates that during this time he continued living with Kelly in that state. He continued to abuse her, doing things like burning her tongue, chest, and crotch so that she wouldn't share her sexuality with anyone else. Then what he told happened. In his first account partially, that is, in that state. One night, he left her in the bathtub with cold water until Kelly finally passed away. He also told these people that after she passed away, he continued to have relations with Kelly's body, even saying that this excited him more. I think with such a perverse story, one can realize that this person should not be free, regardless of whether this story is true or not. Because that's what he told the inmates, and we don't know why he did it. We don't know if he was telling the truth because he is a very macabre person and just wanted to tell it, or if he wanted to make himself look more dangerous than the others. But in short, he shouldn't be with other people, interacting with them because he is a danger. And who knows what would have happened if they hadn't found him, if he had maybe hurt more people. So finally, Alan's trial came in early 2023. In addition to the charges for the murder of Kelly, he was also facing charges for raping his cellmate. There was tons of evidence against him, however, there was a small detail, rather a big detail. And that is, if you remember the first raid they did on Alan's house, it was done without a search warrant issued by a judge. And that is essentially illegal. It's illegal. I don't think I need to be given details about why it's illegal for the police to search your house. So Alan's entire defense attorney's strategy was based on getting all the evidence collected in this raid thrown out. And anything that came from it, since they were illegal. Even so, the judge saw everything that had happened and came to a ruling allowing the prosecution to introduce this evidence on the grounds that if they had had a search warrant, they would have arrived at the same result. With this, the case against Alan was sealed. Even so, as we mentioned, the confessions he made to other inmates were not admitted as evidence. To not complicate the trial part with the evidence they had, it was enough to prove that Alan was the killer, but not enough to prove how, when, and a clear motive. Finally, this man was found guilty of all charges and was sentenced to 60 years in prison, with a minimum of 39 years of effective imprisonment before being able to request parole. Currently, Alan continues to serve his sentence. This is where we end. Let me know if you knew about this case and share your opinions below, as I am reading them. Thanks again to CyberGhost Virtual Private Network for sponsoring this video. If you need a virtual private network, it's truly a great choice at a very reasonable and affordable price. In the description of this video, you will find the link to the special offer from CyberGhost Virtual Private Network with 4 free months, so don't miss this opportunity. That's all for now. Thank you to my Patreons and channel members for your support, with nothing more to say. Here is a new video, here is a recommended video. You can subscribe by clicking on my face and see you in another video. Goodbye.